1996 as a 19-year-old with the International Committee Against Racism. The end of my freshman year, we were in front of then House Speaker Newt Gingrich's office, no, his house actually, protesting the then contract with America, which we believed and knew then, as we know now, to be the contract on America, which was working to privatize working class initiatives and policies that came out of that New Deal era, such as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And from that trajectory onward, I've been engaged. We've been engaged both on a student level, both in the community level. When I first graduated Howard, going into the nonprofit complex, which we're going to talk a little bit about tonight, via the ACLU and Amnesty International, within the military, and even today in my early 40s, 25 years. I didn't plan it this way, but as Kwame Ture taught us, once you fight for the people always fight to protect you. So thank you again.
No, I appreciate you, brother. And yeah, we definitely gonna have to get right into it. So again, audience, if you just joining us, our guest tonight is Brother Jonathan Wesley Hutto Sr. And he is a long distance runner. Just gave you a little bit of his background and still very young, but been organizing, as he mentioned, since his days at Howard University. Make sure you all like and share this video. This is going to be an important conversation tonight as we talk about not just anti-Blackness in the nonprofit industrial complex, but the specific targeting of Black men in particular. And I have witnessed some of that myself at different conferences and things like that. So Jonathan, we're here tonight because you have had an experience recently, and if it had to happen to anybody, and they expect somebody to fight it, and you know how to do that, and you know how to do that well. Can you just share a little bit more, I guess, a little bit of background about what happened, and what, just why are we here tonight, and just tell the audience what your experience has been.
Definitely. As you stated, the struggle for Black men, conscientious, aware, warrior Black men within the nonprofit industrial complex is certainly not new. It's something that I've had to confront ever since I was in my early 20s, when I took my first position as a community outreach director for the ACLU of the National Capital Area. That was 22 years ago. That was in the fall of 1999 when I was 22 years old. However, I will say this: I have never, until recently, faced the attack, because I never framed it as an attack. 20 years ago, if you would ask me what it was, I would tell you that it was tension. I would tell you there's tension. I'm calling, just my presence causes tension. It causes microaggressions. I would frame it that way. Today, it's beyond that. It's beyond microaggressions. It's beyond tension. We're talking about attacks. We're talking about intentional attacks upon a person's dignity, upon their integrity, upon their humanity, and upon my personhood and my manhood. That's what we're talking about here. So in this specific instance, we are speaking of the organization Empower DC in Washington, D.C. It's an organization that I was recruited to by the executive director, Paris and LaRuzi. I was recruited to the organization in the spring of 2018 when I was giving some serious support work from the alumni base. I'm an alumnus of Howard University. I was giving support to the students of Howard. They had occupied the administration building in response to deep grievances that they had sparked by financial aid controversy and other issues on the campus. It was within that milieu that Parisa first asked me to come onto her radio show to speak about what was happening on the campus. I didn't feel that comfortable just going on the show speaking, because I'm not one of the students on the campus. I actually organized the students some student leaders to be on her show. And afterwards, she engaged in a conversation with me. And I don't want to be too long-winded, but recruited me to the organization. Let me say that there's a couple of things I want to highlight. Number one, Empower DC, unlike other organizations I work for, I would say the staff was a small, tight-knit staff. I was the only African American on the staff. I will also say that empower DC in terms of its power, because all organizations have a power concentration. So in terms of its power, most of the power within the organization, at least from the functioning of the organization, the day-to-day operations of the organization, was concentrated within the executive director, Paris Lerouzi. It is very largely driven. It was very largely driven by her personality, her charisma, her deep commitment. She's a very highly skilled practitioner. In fact, I would say that she's probably one of the most highly skilled in terms of, one of the most highly skilled I've worked with. I think I could say that. Oftentimes people have their lanes in which they can operate. Parisa can operate in a myriad of lanes in terms of how she gets down with the organization, whether that's speaking, orating, whether that's writing, whether that's driving grants. I mean, she's pretty highly skilled. However, one of the things I noticed about the organization early on was, while they had a executive director who was highly skilled and a community organizing director who also is pretty skilled, I did not see the organization as being deeply ideological, or having a defined theory of change. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I found it interesting, and then I went from it being interesting to now understanding what it really is. That an organization that is not black led can appropriate the symbol of the Black liberation struggle. If you
You
go to
got to talk about it.
Yeah, if you go to empowerdc.org, the symbol of Empower DC is this right here, the black fist. That's
And it's
that's
red, yeah.
that's the actual symbol of the organization. And we know where that symbol comes from. That comes out of the Black liberation struggle, popularized deeply by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. We want to give a salute to Willie Mukasa Ricks, who's still among us, among the living, down in Atlanta, Georgia, along with his comrade, the late Kwame Ture Stokely Carmichael, who popularized it and propagated to the masses of our people decades ago. We literally went from being Negroes to Black overnight through that movement. And of course, 2 years later, the Olympic Committee for Human Rights, a salute to John Carlos, Tommy Lee Smith, who extended that fist in Mexico City. But I bring that history to the present to say that the idea that that fist could then be appropriated, and I'm gonna use the word an interloper. I'm gonna use that term. The People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, in its training, its anti-racism training, one of the best I ever went through, talks about not talks about, goes deep into the principle of what a gatekeeper is in a community, which most of us have functioned as, meaning people who work in a community, but we did not actually gain the permission of the community before we went in the community. Okay. And so one of the principles of the People's Institute for Survival Beyond anti-racism training is to liberate the gatekeeper to actually work in the benefit of the community. All this to say that the idea that fist could be appropriated by an interloper, and then could be used against me within the organization, and what I'm going to term as economic violence against me personally, against my family, my nuclear family, also my movement family, against the community that I've served for years and decades. I'm not an interloper. I come from the belly of the Black community, the Black working class. But at the same time, as an organizer, we understand that when these moments happen, we've got to lean in with everything that we have. This is a teaching moment here for us as organizing practitioners within the nonprofit industrial complex. And I want to stop here. I don't want to be too long. I just want to say that again, 'cause I know you're going to ask some other questions to get into some particulars, but I've never felt under this type of intense attack. That's number one. And never from folks, never, because again, if I talk about the struggle at Amnesty International 20 years ago, that struggle involved mostly white human rights defenders who, by and large, came from privileged backgrounds. If I talk about the struggle I engaged within the United States Navy, fighting racism on a warship, that was a struggle by and large against white males coming from marginalized working class backgrounds. even when I was a student engaged in struggle, right? I mean, there was a term that the late Steve Coker used to coin. Well, he didn't coin it, but he popularized, the boule, the black bourgeoisie. But that struggle had a different kind of context. But I would not say that the black elite of Howard ever attacked me in what has happened today. Like I never would believe that not only would I be attacked in the way that I have been, but that the attack would come from persons of color who claim to be fighters and to be fighting for the best interests of marginalized people. I would never have conceived that. But that's where we are today in 2021.
I'm actually surprised at that last comment that you made. People of color, and you would have never conceived that. There's a lot of folks, especially in the nationalist community, Pan African nationalists, Black nationalists, who, as Dr. John Henry Clark famously coined it, we don't have any friends, right? We don't have any friends. So when you say you were surprised, I'm surprised you surprised. Like I only know Parisa just, through the movement. I don't know her personally. I think I may have met her maybe once or twice. And I wasn't surprised when I heard about what happened to you because, and I don't know if you saw this, but it seems to me that the anti-blackness that runs in so-called other people of color is something that we don't want to deal with as Black people. Society doesn't want to deal with, and we don't want to deal with it until we're forced to, and our backs are against the wall. I think it's interesting as you stated that she recruited you. You speak about how highly skilled she is and all of those different kind of things. When so back up a little bit because I believe you with the organization for about 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that. How was it just being a part of the organization before all hell broke loose and you were terminated?
So, so again, number one, I think your comment speaks to the dichotomy within me, right? Because I come out of a civil rights ethos, meaning that while I'm a child of Atlanta, Georgia, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Beulah Baptist Church, So some of those tenets, and what I mean by tenets, meaning although I'm at my core, I'm anti-racist, I struggle not to be anti anyone's identity. I struggle to meet people where they are and how they present themselves to me. And so, in that sense, when meeting Empower DC and feeling the ethos of the organization, what it's working to do to provide housing as a human right for all human beings, deeply affordable housing for the most marginalized of Washington D.C., the most gentrified city in the country. I mean, how could I not support an organization like that? How could I not lend my body and my energy and my spirit to it if I have the will and the time to do so? That being stated, um, we know that in politics, at the core of politics is power, and so I mean, and that's just that's the aspect of politics that is not discussed or struggled with in that way. And so, in going into the organization, uh, based upon the base that we were beginning to build and harness within the organization, I was leading the organization's racial equity work with practitioners across the city who were recruited in a selective process, building that racial equity cohort out. I was helping to coordinate and lead some very awesome work within the organization. And I had Parisa's back in that way. Parisa was a hard charger, still is a hard charger in that way. But there were elements within the organization that when I look back at it, had some issues with the spirit that I brought within the organization, and because of those issues, it comes out. I'm trained to pay deep attention, not just externally but internally to the internal workings of an organization, as the late Imam Jamil taught us when he was speaking at a testimonial dinner for Kwame Ture decades ago, my junior year at Howard University. He stated that one of the greatest shortcomings of his generation was that they were emulating the very people they were fighting against, their morals and their dictates. So with that being stated, on one afternoon, I give you the incident that really changed, began to change my outlook on the organization internally. It began a process. It didn't all happen at once, but it began. It was a situation where we had just had a staff meeting. This was in November of 2018, and I had inadvertently left my coffee cup in the conference room. I went to the restroom, and I came back to the office. When I come back to the office again, the organizing director, he's a Latino male. Daniel Del Pialago is his name. He's on the website. You can look him up. He has my coffee cup on his desk. And he says to me as I walk in that office, he says, Jonathan, your wife doesn't work here. That's what comes out of his mouth. Zakia, the pressure in my body hit like to the through my head. I mean, you're a wife, you have a husband, you already know was germinating in my body and my soul at that moment. In that room were two other women of color, black women. Let me not say women of color, black women in that room. One of the women in that room is prominent in DC, prominent within certain circles. Her name is Sabia Prince, Dr. Sabia Prince. Okay, she's a noted anthropologist. She defines herself ideologically as a black feminist. Okay, no one spoke up for me. No one. I was so heated because I'm trained, because I'm a black man and I'm a sizable black man. I'm trained not to get verbal with people. I grabbed my phone, walked out of the office. I'm walking down the street. How did you know what? I called Parisa on the phone. You got to meet me out here. We got to talk. There's a conversation we got to have. And when I talked to her, I said, look, I don't know what's up with these people. I've never been in a situation ever in my life where people would mention your spouse and don't even know your spouse. Have never met my wife to this very day. Has never been to my home. What the hell are you doing talking about my wife? Are you serious? Mentioning her as if I guess she's a maid or a slave to me, my wife? You mean my human resource manager wife? You mean my wife, my six-figure making wife? My wife is kick butt in that way. None, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, but I didn't even say all that to Parisa. Well, that's none of her. That was none of her business. What I said to Parisa was, this situation needs to be dealt with. She assured me that it would be, and she assured me that there would not be any other aggressions like that within the organization. Fast forward 4 months later, we're in February 2019. And there's an email exchange that takes place between Sabia Prince and myself, the noted anthropologist, black feminist. Um, in that email exchange, she gets triggered. I'm asking her just pertinent questions on a work project. The fact that I even ask questions about things. See, I didn't realize that I'm working in an environment where I guess a black man is not supposed to even ask questions or even be assertive. We're just talking about just basically being a human being, being assertive and taking ownership of work projects. For the next couple of days, she didn't even come to work because she was demanding a mediation and that it be led by this same gentleman, this organizing director, who had just assaulted my wife 4 months
Hell no.
later. You understand? So that's when I get into writing mode. And I let Parisa and Daniel know. I said, if there's gonna be a mediation or arbitration, which I'll engage in, but he ain't leading it. Ain't no way he leading the mediation. I said, ain't no way. I
Did
said,
he ever apologize to you?
I'm gonna get to that. Check this.
Okay.
I because what he was attempting to say was that when I have issues of certain magnitude, I come to him about them, etc. I told him no. I told him, and I made sure that everything I was saying to him was not verbal; it was written down. I said, no, I'm not doing that. I said, I'm not coming to a person who would actually insult my wife. This is 4 months later. Okay, it was in that email exchange because it was pretty very direct what I was saying to him, very direct. It was in that email exchange that he finally apologized and attributed to him making a bad joke. It's a bad joke, you know, and that he would only talk to me about work matters or what have you. See, so that's so this whole notion of joking, like jokes and comedy really is a way for people to use and be microaggressive with you, to be honest with you. Okay. Let me fast forward. So that apology came, but that apology, this is where we have to make this is where because those of us who are trained in racism and oppression understand that there is no racism, there is no oppression where it's not institutional. So in that instance, yes, an apology came, but it did not come about through an organizational process in Empower DC. It came about because I demanded it. I demanded it of myself. This was not a process instituted by the executive director. This was not a process that was put in place by the board chair. Anybody. This is because if no one stands for me, I stand for me. I stand for my wife. Okay, and I'm doing it in a nonviolent, direct way. In a nonviolent, direct way. Fast forward to August 2000, when I'm being recruited again for another position at the Department of Energy and Environment. I'm being recruited. And I was forthright with Parisa. I told Parisa that there's a position that's come up at the Department of Energy and Environment, an equity program management position. Some people have expressed interest in me and that I'm looking to apply for this position. It was at that point, August of 2000, last year, that Parisa Naruzzi stated that she deeply wanted to keep me at Empower DC. She asked me what would it take to keep me at Empower DC. And then she had Frances McQuarrie, that young lady you're looking at right there, initiate a discussion, a conversation with me about this. And I stated that, you know, I certainly could use more resources. And we had a candid conversation. Make a long story short, a month later, on September 15th, I received a letter from signed by Paris, well, signed by
Which
Francis.
one is the feminist, McCray?
Uh, Frances McCray has never defined herself ideologically to me, but
I'm saying the one that you were talking
oh,
about.
the one I
That
was speaking about, she's no longer on staff. She's no longer on
oh,
staff.
good. Okay.
But I want to bring this to a summation here because when I finish here, you'll see Frances McCray. You might see her in a certain way. So make a long story short, the so Frances McCray had a conversation with me. We had a candid conversation, and then middle of September 2000, I received a letter um, from um, from Parisa stating that select employees at Empower DC had received pay increases, and that my pay increase would be going up $8,000, and I also was promoted to the position of senior community organizer within the organization. This was on September the 15th. I want you to keep this date for those who are listening in your minds or written down. However, this was September 15th, 2020. I'm promoted to a position of senior community organizer, and I'm given an $8,000 raise. During my time at Empower DC over these 2 years, I had never received an evaluation at all. We there was no evaluation, so that was my evaluation as far as I'm concerned. Um,
I know that's right.
I then sent a personal note to both Paris and Francis, thanking them and telling them that I was going to frame um, the letter. And then Francis makes a comment that we know it's not all that you desired, but we hope it shows good faith that we want to keep you. I then receive a communication 6 days later that this is on 6 days later from that letter. So the letter came on the 15th. I received a communication on September 21st that I was to be in a mediation based upon how the community organizing assistant at the time, Nicole Odom, how she judged the text message I sent her where I was asking her basically why she dropped the ball on some mutual aid support work we were doing in Southwest DC. We had engaged in some deep mutual aid work. I was strong. I was leading that work on behalf of Empower DC. There was a split on the staff, in fact, in terms of even engaging in mutual aid during the COVID crisis. But Parisa wielded the organization, and again, I backed her up as I always did. Um, so when they said I was going into this mediation, Zakia, my instinct was, because Francis framed it as an elephant being in the room. That's how the communication came to me. I instinctively said, "Well, yeah, there's been an elephant in the room for a long time in this organization. Since I've been in this organization, that elephant was never resolved from an institutional basis." I was referring back to the incident with Daniel. Francis then comes forward and states that and I never knew these things that she was saying, that number one, she knew of the incident. Number one. Number two, that she had recommended to the board chair being an arbitrator in the situation. Number three, that Parisa had spoken to her and she thought that the situation was resolved. But then lastly, Francis says, I'm surprised that it's still an issue. I'm surprised it's still an issue. This was
Basically, you should have just sucked it up and got over
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I'm surprised still an issue. So this was the last communication I sent forward to since I was a staff in the Power DC. Now keep in mind, I was promoted on September 15th to senior community organizer with an $8,000
And
raise.
on the 21st, you were let go.
On the 20, oh no, on the 21st, I was told I was going into a mediation.
Okay.
On the next day, the 22nd, before we go into this mediation, I sent the communication. Based upon those comments from the operation director, I sent the communication that stated this. I said that number one, I said, you're surprised that it's still an issue for me. I said, you're surprised that someone referring to my wife in such a way is still an issue for me. I remember saying, I don't know your background. Okay. I said, but
Do you know who Yolanda Barker is? Is she somebody that's with Empower DC or supportive of Empower
that's not
DC?
that's my wife. Um,
Oh, okay. Sorry.
okay. So yeah. So at any rate, so so I said in this communication that you're surprised it's still an issue. You're surprised that someone referring to my wife in such a fashion is an issue. I then
Right.
say I then say I don't know your background. I said, but anyone who would refer, because I didn't even mention Daniel's name. I said anyone who would refer to a person's spouse in such a fashion and has never met them, you could be nothing less than a racist and a xenophobe. That's what I said. But
Yeah.
then I want to make sure I made it institutional. I said anyone that would support somebody.
Yeah, I'm gonna put his face back up there so
I said
everybody can see
anybody. I
him.
said anybody who would support
Let me put him back
someone
up there right now.
making. I said anyone who would support someone making such a statement like that has to be a racist and a xenophobe as well. Okay. Then I stopped, made a hard stop. I said, now that's how I feel politically. I said, I feel that way politically. You make a comment like that about a person's spouse. You've never met my spouse. You know nothing about my family in that way. I don't even bring my family into my political work in that way, and it's for a reason. Okay. You make those
Right.
you make those kind of comments, you could be nothing less than a racist and a xenophobe. And anybody that would support someone making those kind of comments could be nothing less than a racist and a xenophobe. Hard stop. But then I said, that's how I feel politically.
Mm.
I said, but now personally, I'll be honest with you. This is why I said this. I said the words that were said to me that day actually constitutes fighting words. They do.
Yeah.
They constitute fighting words. I said, however, I said I choose nonviolence. I said this. I choose nonviolence and
That's your
peaceful.
that's your
And,
civil rights
hey,
ethos coming
that's
out.
my civil rights coming out. I said I choose nonviolence. I said this in my email. I choose nonviolence and peaceful resistance to such derelict and reprehensible behavior. When I sent that message to Kill, 24 hours later, I'm sitting in front of Parisa being suspended from the organization, in her words, for being hostile, violent. I said
Violent.
violent, yes, hostile, violent, and threatening in my email messages.
Let me pause right here because see
Mhm.
this is why I can't with these liberal so-called do-gooder organizations, especially who claim to be doing work on behalf and for black people. Number one is that, and this is why I feel like we don't talk about, we don't really ideologically understand how deep anti-blackness is. And people like to always talk about the Trumps of the world. They like to always talk about Republicans or conservatives. But this is the stuff right here. Like, they literally use stereotypical thinking, stereotypical sort of conditioning about Black men. And meanwhile, they also never gave a damn about when you were transgressed upon. But immediately, when somebody else within the organizations was even perceived to be transgressed from you, action had to be taken. I don't have no respect for anybody that does that. And I intend to continue to make it known. And the other thing that concerns me, and I'm really angry about it, and I think about Dr. Bobby Wright. He always said that, you know, Black folks don't even have the power to sanction people who transgress upon us, right? Empower DC should not be allowed to exist to do fucking work for Black people in DC after this transgression. And I can guarantee you ain't the first. If they even had any other Black men as a part of the organization, what I have found is that if you actually start talking to Black men who have been a part of these liberal organizations, and because you know the nonprofit industrial complex is filled with do-gooders, so if you find Black men who have been a part of these type of organizations, trust me, they got a story. I got a story about even my own husband. And we were at a conference, and he was basically attacked in a similar sort of fashion, not attacked physically, but attacked just in his own essence. He was given a presentation and again about self-identifying Black feminists, young too, you know what I mean? Challenging him, just basically being rude, just outright rude. And thank goodness I wasn't in the room. You know, they say, you know, that they say, you know, the creator know what he's doing. So, but thankfully it was people that knew us both, right? It were people that knew us that took care of the situation. Another Black woman who just basically said, what are you doing? You know? But it was that experience where he was just like, I'm done. I don't even know what just happened. He didn't even know what just happened. He didn't even know like the ideology around a lot of these aggressive, whatever damn wave of Black feminists this shit is. But he, like a regular everyday Black man, right? You know, not even understanding the politics of being in a so-called social justice, you know, and I'm starting to see more and more Black men starting to come out and speak about things like this. I don't know if you followed the story of the brother who was eventually murdered under suspicious circumstances, Darren Seals out of Ferguson. He called it out too. Remember him?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So Black men are speaking up. It's just that who's willing to listen?
No, absolutely, absolutely. No, I no, it when you mention you know, other Black bodies that have been misused in this way, interestingly enough, Empower has a history before me of doing this to working class Black women. In fact, the founder of Empower DC, Linda Leaks, who comes directly out of the Black liberation struggle.
Wait, Parisa didn't found Empower DC?
No, she's not the principal founder of Empower DC. The principal
Wow.
founder of Empower DC is a Black woman
Oh my God, that makes it even worse.
who
Keep going.
who still lives and works on the ground in DC. Her name is Linda Leaks. That's the inspiration of for Empower DC. She brought Parisa in as a co-founder for Empower DC.
And she took the organization over from her.
I mean, Linda gave me a story the other day that of how she was pushed out of the organization about a decade ago. But to finish this piece here, just real quickly, I want to make this. I want to because I want to deal with just how expeditious this was, how swift this was. From the time I sent that email stating that anyone who would describe my wife in such a way could be nothing less than a racist and a xenophobe. Anyone defending them, racist and xenophobe. Within 24 hours, I was suspended by the organization, handing over my keys to Parisa. And Parisa was describing this suspension as almost like a liberal kind of kind of soft touch because she said the board had already recommended my termination. So the board executive committee, according to Parisa, had recommended my termination within 24 hours. And within less than 24 hours after that. So I sent that email on September 22nd. By the morning of the 24th, I'm being verbally told that I'm fired from the organization. Right before I began,
Verbally, they didn't even do it in writing.
didn't even do it in writing. What happened is I saw that my bio had been taken off the website the night of the 23rd, September 23rd. I also my email had also been disbanded. So I mean, everything looked like I was terminated. I just hadn't received anything official. I was on my way to see an attorney that morning of the 24th and called Paris on her phone and asked her what had taken place. And she told me verbally on the phone, Jonathan, I'm very sorry. Um, but yes, you have been terminated from Empower DC.
That's
You
so
know,
ghetto and tacky.
let me say this. I want to say this real quick because today when I was having lunch with my wife, I was going back through some documents that I hadn't read in 20 years from my time at Amnesty International, and because a lot of my foundational training in human rights comes
Yeah,
comes from that, and so I raised serious issues then back in my early 20s. I never forget it was a process where I had applied to be a deputy director in the organization. I was certainly more than qualified, and
right.
I wasn't even given a final interview. I remember I didn't even make it to the next stage, and I remember sending off an email to to then the regional director, the newly appointed regional director, a white gentleman with a Quaker background, and I very direct like I've always been, and his response to me, and it shocked me because I that's not what I was pushing for when I sent my email. I was just being forthright. His response to me was to resign as the regional director. He resigned. In other words, he said to me, Jonathan, he told me, he said, you raised some issues with me to let me know that I'm not in any way, um, you know, capable of carrying this job out for the entire region. I will work to find someone who is. He was that deeply hit by what I read, and it always stayed with me because it said to me that while I felt a certain way. I wasn't trying to push him out, but that was his integrity check on himself. I'm bringing this 20 years later. I'm tying it into your comment because to harm someone in an economically violent way and then continue to maintain your position as an executive director, to continue to maintain your position within a board executive committee after committing this type of harm, and to continue to promote and purport yourself as an advocate of racial equity, it's beyond a moral disgrace. It's beyond a moral disgrace. It really it is the from a as a microcosm example in terms of how everything is a commodity within this system, even poverty and marginalization. That it becomes a
Right.
commodity that then other people can leverage into social, political, economic capital that can then be used against the very people who come out of this community and who come out of this movement. So yeah. So yes. At this point right now, I know you're probably asking the questions of where we are today, but it's where we are today because, as you know, Zaki, I'm a fighter. So we waged the struggle October
They had
1st.
the right one. Tell
Yeah,
us, tell the audience where we are, whatever details you are able to share.
right, right,
Because
right.
you actually filed a complaint against the organization. You just
Ab-
told us a story. Filed a
Absolutely. I mean,
complaint against the
absolutely.
organization, and the and the complaint was sustained. Tell us how that went.
So Washington D.C. has an Office of Human Rights. So it came out of
Yeah.
that black home rule government,
Mhm.
1977. People like the late Marion, David Clark, late Julius Hobson, and others who came up with the D.C. Human Rights Act of 1977, which created the Office of Human Rights. Washington, D.C. has an Office of Human Rights that is more expansive than the National Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. It has more depth to it. There's 21 protected classes within the Human Rights Act, and in this instance, I mean, even as an at-will employee, because at-will employees legally can be terminated for almost just about anything with no explanation. But that termination cannot be discriminatory nor retaliatory. I
You
filed.
clearly got a case of retaliation.
Yeah,
It's clear.
I mean, I'm when it happened to me, I'm sitting there thinking to myself. I mean, I'm one of these kind of people that I don't always say what's on my mind. So I'm being somewhat clandestine. I'm thinking, don't they realize they violating human rights here? I mean,
Right.
the way y'all moving is so swift. And then Parisa framed it like human resource. I'm thinking to myself, I got a human resource professional in my house.
Right.
So I filed the complaint on October 1st. It was heard by a human rights intake officer on November 18th, 6 weeks later. And for 5 months, the kid, I didn't hear anything from the Office of Human Rights. I would send an occasional email here and there to see what was going on with the investigation. But I know some aspects of that investigation. I know that Empower DC had an opportunity to respond to my complaint that I laid down with evidence. That's another thing. You have to give evidence, and it has to meet the term they're using is prima facie, basically based on first impression. Does it look like on its face what you're saying? From November 18th all the way to April 26th, I didn't hear a thing. But on April 26th, the Office of Human Rights came back with charges of discrimination and retaliation in this situation. That's huge.
What I
For
loved about how you framed your complaint was you specifically identified and named your gender. I'm not used to black men knowing or understanding the fact that you all are also oppressed by your gender, being
absolutely,
black and male.
absolutely, oh, absolutely, yes, yeah, indeed, indeed. No, there was and I pointed out the institutional difference. I raise a issue. It's not dealt with institutionally. There's no mediation. In other words, you can insult my wife. You only have to know my wife, insult her to my face. That's power. That's oppression. You know, and someone else can interpret a text message which I sent to the Office of Human Rights. That's another thing. Everything that because in the letter of termination they said my emails were sufficient enough to terminate me. I took those same emails and sent them to the Office of Human Rights. You all look at this. Look at the emails. Look at the text messages. You tell me is this violent or threatening? The last email I sent, I even raised the banner of nonviolence and peaceful resistance, and was called violent for being nonviolent and peaceful resistance. So the charge came on April the 26th, and now we're at a stage because once this takes place, there's mandatory mediation that has to take place. We're going into mandatory mediation within the next month. And so I'm going to be very keen and focused on what's the tone and the tenor of Empower DC. Think about it this way, Zakia. I was thinking about this the other day. They canceled a mediation. They canceled an organizational mediation in order to 9 months later come into a state mandated mediation. You know what the person that they because the other former employees I've talked to, there was this theme that while they felt very violated, they just it's still and some of them still do feel violated. That they just felt like I'm gonna go ahead and move on, just move on with my life, what have you. And
That's
with
usually what we do after we've been violated, but they
yeah,
had the right one with you
yeah, and
and
my
your wife.
yeah,
And
and
your
my
wife living with somebody who was a human resource professional. She wasn't letting that go.
I'm like, there is no moving on. Only moving on I'm moving on you. There is no moving on. No, there's going to be some resolution. Not and I'm leveraging this not just for myself personally, although I definitely need to be dealt with in a progressive way, in a restorative way. But I'm doing this also for other nonprofit staffers, other workers who go through this. It happens all the time, you know. But we have to also commit ourselves, and it can be very painful, but it can feel like you're suffering. But suffering breeds character. We have to commit ourselves to the protracted struggle here. It's a protracted struggle, and it's going to be some resolution, and we'll see what that resolution is. But again, I'm I'm awestruck in certain ways not, and in certain ways I'm not, that again a violation like this can take place. People maintain their positions, board executive leadership, and I use the example of that Quaker human rights director from Amnesty years ago, who it never even got to this level. He ain't had enough integrity to resign. These are people that will violate me, commit economic violence against me, and still purport themselves to be leaders in the community. It's a moral disgrace. If Parisa
It's
act,
absolutely a damn disgrace. And then doing work on behalf of black folks.
yeah, yeah, it's a disgrace. If I could not do, first of all, I would not violate anyone in that fashion. But if I ever unconsciously, I use the word unconsciously, did something of that magnitude, I would have no dignity to resign. There's no way that I would continue in a position after economically violating someone in the way that I was economically violated. So the struggle continues, the luta continua, and I'll be keeping the community updated. But I purposely did not even come forward, Zakia, until those charges came. Nobody knew. I don't even think you knew that
No,
violation.
I didn't know. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
why you hold out? You
yeah.
like we could have
No,
did an organizing thing on
look. I did that on purpose because I know how this works. When you come forth with allegations, people will say they're baseless. No,
right.
I wanted the Office of Human Rights to vet this. I did. I said no, and I will wait as long as it takes. That violation happened on September 24th last year. I did not come forward until April 26th this year. I didn't come forward till 3.5 weeks ago. For 7 months, I said nothing about Empower DC. I moved on in a certain way, was engaging in struggle out here in my community on police accountability. But in the back of my mind and in my heart, I said, because I said, there's no way the Office of Human Rights are not coming forward. If they don't, I said, they're not, then that's a whole other issue. But I said, when it comes forth, I'm going to come forth. And I'm going to state to the community at large what happened to me in the spirit of Mamie Till Mobley when she opened that casket. That spirit of saying to the community, this is what happened to me, and this
That's right.
and what's happened to me. In a metaphorical sense, that institutional racism, we can economically violate you, we can fire you, we can make it. I've been on unemployment ever since, so we can make it where you're not receiving the same amount of income you was receiving.
Right. That
That
is
that's
economic violence.
that's economic violence. That's institutional
They
racism
tried to cut you off at your knees.
being done by an organization with the black fist as its symbol,
Come on.
appropriated from our people. It's it's
Come
it's
on.
uh, it's, it's beyond reprehensible. But again, here we are, pushing, pressing, as we always do.
There are so many contradictions in this nonprofit world. It is sickening, Jonathan. I mean, I don't hardly trust none of these so-called do-gooders, not unless they real old school, like they are vetted through the community. And like this is news to me. Here I am thinking that Parisa founded Empower DC. I didn't know it was actually founded by a black woman that she later pushed out. And
Yeah,
you talking about what you must have just found this out too, because I'm like,
I
that's
did.
even more. Look, I
I
was about to
did.
say that's even more evidence we ain't got no friends. Come
what
on.
what happened is when I came forward, there were several people who said to me, "I know who Linda Leaks is. I knew Linda Leaks before Empower DC. I actually, it was at Empower DC that I found out she was even had a history with the organization. I knew Linda Leaks through other, liberation work, but several key people say you need to talk to Linda Leaks. You need to talk
Wow.
to her. You need to ask her her story." And she told me. She told me what happened to her in a very intimate way, that she deeply keeps close. She doesn't talk that outward about it, but it's a sore spot for her. But most importantly, what was very uplifting for me was the solidarity and the support she had for me. She said, "I'm very proud of you. I'm with you, Jonathan." And she told me, "You go all the way." That's what she told me. She said, "You go all the way." So that's what we're doing. And let me say this because I want to be clear here. I'm not trying to tear Empower DC down. Actually, if the lead, because Dr. King said it correctly. Leaders in parentheses are not judged by where they stand in times of comfort and convenience, but where they stand in times of crisis, and controversy. Leadership rises to the occasion. So
So
it'll be interesting again to see organizationally how Empower DC responds to this. It's a
how
teaching,
have they responded thus far? Have you heard from Parisa since then?
not at all, not at all. And that's probably a legal reason for that, I'm sure, but no, not at all. Mhm.
What can be done as we kind of wrap up? We're almost at our time, but I'm just thinking, should there, because I see a lot of other folks that I respect in DC who are black, including folks like Maurice over at Service City. They've done some work with them. Should there be sort of a calling in? Like you said, you're not trying to tear them apart, but people should know what happened to you, and there should also be some community accountability. You said it's not just about you, right? They've done this in the past. They did it to a black woman who founded the organization. Now you, and I'm sure a bunch of black folks in between. There's got to be some community accountability. I mean, the organization want to hold Bowser accountable. Well, who holding them accountable?
Speak on that. Speak on that. No,
I'm
no,
serious.
no, no. Yeah, I know you are. Yeah, there's other organizers I've spoken to. One of them, Leanne Scott, who did that
Oh yeah,
document.
I'm familiar with her. Yeah.
Yeah, Leanne used to work at Empower DC. She
Oh, I
got
didn't know that.
she got a story to tell too. But she's the one that did the documentary film on my life that you raised up earlier. She did that film for me years ago, about 4 years ago. But no, there definitely needs to be community accountability. That is a deep contradiction within the nonprofit industrial complex, especially at Empower DC. My foundational training in at Amnesty International again 20 years ago was an organization that struggled in terms of power sharing with membership. You would go to regional meetings and see members voting on resolutions and recommendations to the organization. You would go to annual meetings, there'd be debates and struggles all night long on human rights policy. I didn't experience that in Power DC. Again, it was too much power concentration in the
In
executive
one person.
in one person. There needs to be deep human rights training amongst the staff and amongst volunteer leaders on what is the DC Human Rights Act, and what are the rights. That it needs to be an understanding of what legal protected activity is within the workplace, because that's what I was engaged
Wow.
in. I have the right as a worker to raise grievances. I have the right to
Yeah.
raise grievances. You may not like them, but I have the right to raise them.
Right.
And not to suffer and endure retaliation as a result. But no, there must be a community accountability. But the contradiction is, in order to be accountable to the community, you have to believe within yourself that what you're doing is an extension of the community itself. And when you have an organization that leverages oppression as social, economic, and political capital to then
Right.
build budgets, to then pay yourself salary and health insurance or what have you, to then wage campaigns that the community has not vetted, does not own. I mean, one of the things I did in the Power DC consistently was check in with the very people that I purport to represent and work for. As far as I'm concerned, my position in Power DC was because of them, because of
Amen.
the deep marginalization and oppression they endure. They made it possible for me to work for them. That has to
Yeah.
be the ideology, and maybe it's because of that my attempt to liberate my gatekeeping status in that way that I found myself in a collision, if you will, with the board executive leadership and with the executive director. So
Yeah. Well, one thing that I can say is I hope that this story makes it and is shared widely. And I hope it makes it round. As you know, I have a national reach, so I'm sure there are folks in all kind of other places that are listening to this. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I hope it inspires more black men to come forward and to fight, to really, really call out the contradictions of these so-called do-gooders and these other people of color and white folks and white adjacent other people of color who you know, have deep anti-blackness that, they may mean well in some of the work that they're doing, but they're still dealing with anti-blackness. There's anti-blackness in every corner of this world. You can't go to India without dealing with the untouchables. Who the untouchables look like, right? You know what I mean? So all over the world, there's deep anti-blackness, and so for people to understand that we got to keep keeping that at the fore, and also this idea of the specific oppression of black men in all of the ways in which that it shows up. That's what anti-black misandry is at its most basic level. When you and I were talking about having this show, remember I connected you to Brother Tommy Curry a while ago because I know his book and his writing and just his activism as well, and his advocacy has really helped to bring a lot of black men out of the shadows, because many black men have just been suffering in silence, as you know, dealing with this stuff, not just on the nonprofit industrial complex. I don't know anywhere where it's safe for a black man inside of his own home and his own refuge.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. No, that what happened there to our dear brother George Floyd.
Right.
I said, I had tears streaming down my face. I said the only major difference between me and George Floyd is I'm still alive. That's the only major.
Mm.
I've and
To be choked out
the
economically is
yeah,
what
yeah,
happened to you.
I
Right.
choked out, cut off. Of course,
Damn.
the
Left for dead.
the potential position at DOE going, but if it hadn't been for me internalizing some deep principles in my early years as a kid, I'm hearing the voice of Kwame Ture when he said, because I think of you in this way, in the way that
You did.
you
Hold on. I'm sorry. Back all the way up, Jonathan. You did not tell the audience. Not only did you know Kwame Ture, but you hosted his last public event at Howard.
oh
Why
yes,
you ain't tell people about that?
well,
You knew Khalid. You know I love Khalid Muhammad. Like you better let people know your pedigree up in here.
well, I let you tell as a kid, but Kwame Ture, February 17th, 1998. I'm 2 months shy of my 21st birthday. I'm the student body president at Howard University, working very closely with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Shout out to Bob Brown and Bamboshi Shango, those fighters and comrades of Kwame that I work very closely with. There was a part in that oration, that fireside chat he called it, where he talks about being a young worker going to Mississippi, not knowing anyone, and how the community embraced him because of the spirit that he brought. And what he said was, you remember this. He said, once you fight for the people will always fight to protect you. But your fight must be honest, it must be dignified, it must be with integrity and without no compromise at all. I think about you as a kid when I hear that. I think about people who have reached forward to me, who have cared for me in this, because we're winning. We're going to continue to win. And suffering. These are the words of Jesse Jackson in 1988. Suffering breeds character. Character breeds faith. In the end, faith would not disappoint. And so, in that sense, that's the power. The power to understand that we can will power, we can build power, but we have to just keep on being resistant, continuing to resist, and ultimately, again, to see if Empower DC themselves seize the time and leverage this situation to make themselves better and not bitter. Because again, believe it or not, I'm not trying to tear Empower DC down. I'm actually trying to make them better if they would actually heed the call to be better, and to be restorative and to just be human beings. That's all. Just be human. If human rights is for all human beings, if you want racial equity in the community, why not start at home in your own organization amongst your
Amen.
own people? So yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Where can people find you, Jonathan? How can people support you? You got a cash app you want to drop? We done talked about all this economic violence. You know what I'm saying? You still going through the struggle. You still going through, the process. For people who don't know, because I've actually filed complaints before. These complaints can take forever, man. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Hmm.
And just let the people know how they can find you, and and how they can support you. And
Okay.
again, I hope everybody share this, and
Okay.
hopefully more Black men are inspired to push back on their oppression.
Okay. If anybody wants to cash at me, I thank you for putting that plug out there. I'm gonna put it in the chat, right? I guess, but
Yeah, put it
Uh,
in the chat.
yeah, my I'll put the Cash App in my chat right here. That's
Okay, and I'll put it in the comments. Just put it in the
yeah,
chat. I'll
I
grab
just
it.
I just dropped it right there. Um, and in terms of you can find me
Of course, this is your cash app. You so extra.
99. That's the year I graduated undergrad from Howard University. Um, and anyone want to find me, you can reach me. You can reach me via Facebook, also LinkedIn. Jonathan Wesley Hutto on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn as well. And you can also email me directly. Email me directly. I'll put it in the chat, but you can email me at Jonathan Hutto 99 at gmail.com.
There it is. Yeah, because I feel like there are gonna be some other brothers that go reach forward to you and probably ask you how you did what you did. I know that different states and different localities are different, but they probably just will reach out just to say, I've had a similar situation. What advice can you give me? I
Okay,
find that
absolutely.
happens a lot.
Absolutely, Zakia. We just want to thank you again. We're going to be on Wilma Leon's SiriusXM national show this Saturday. Want to thank Wilma Leon for inviting us on. And again, we're using this situation to educate. We're using it to inspire, to inspire more brothers, as you stated, but our people as a whole who are facing these violations, with specific focus on black men. In other words, support us when we're alive,
Okay,
not when we're dead, choked out, or
come on.
hashtag. No, support us when we're alive, when we have
Right.
breath in our bodies. Support the brothers while they're alive
That's
in
it.
this life, in this life.
This life, right? That's the
Mhm.
benediction right there. Jonathan,
Absolutely.
this has been great. I appreciate you. You always got a place on this platform. Keep us posted on
Yeah.
how everything goes. I know you're continuing to go through the process. Just want to remind people that I put Jonathan's Cash App in the comments. It's Nation 99 with the dollar sign, of course, at the beginning for Cash App. And then if you want to reach out to the brother, his email as well is in the comments. Just make sure that we support the brother. Make sure that we continue to support black men while they're alive, as he stated. Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate you, and we got you back.
Thank you so much, Zakia. And support Sister Zakia, real talk. Support Sister Zakia.
That's right. Y'all better
Support,
like and share this video. That's how you support the channel.
support Sister Zakia. I got to do better by supporting you for supporting us. It takes a lot of work to do what you're doing, and we love you, and we love Hashem for giving you the space and time you need to support us.
I appreciate that, brother.
Salute you, brother Hashem, both of you. Support you
Yeah,
all.
man. Brother Hashem ain't always happy about sharing me with the world, but he's handling it.